Let's stay on that ruling halting the VAT hike and the implication it will have on Parliament, but also on the public. Joining us is Standing Committee on Finance Chairperson, Mr. Joe Maswanganyi, and then, of course, independent analyst Khaya Sithole, who can help us with some of the points that were raised there by Commissioner Khaya Sithole on whether or not businesses will be able to prepare their systems by the 1st of May. But Mr. Maswanganyi, thank you so much for joining us. Khaya, I appreciate your time as well. I do want to start with Mr. Maswanganyi because you've got quite the task on your hand once again. But your initial reaction, that order of the court comes out yesterday, and a part of it reads that the agreement between the parties, the court orders as follows. Point 3, the resolutions of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces adopted on the 2nd of April to accept the report on the Standing Committee on Finance and the Select Committee on Finance on the 2025 fiscal framework are set aside. Your first thoughts when you saw that order of the court yesterday, Mr. Maswanganyi?
Thank you, Naledi, and the viewers. Let's go back to the 2nd of April when the National Assembly adopted the fiscal framework report. On that day, before we talk about the court, the NA took a resolution to the effect that the minister should get a substitute revenue to make up for the VAT that the NA is not agreeing with. It is about the court, it is about the NA that has taken a decision on that day that we don't agree with the 0.5% and the minister should get the substitute. And indeed, on the 24th of April, the minister came back and announced that he's revising the VAT rate increase. And as the Commissioner of SARS has explained in the intro, indeed, there will be no increase as of the 1st of May. But be that as it may, a rates bill will have to be processed, and the Standing Committee on Finance will be meeting Treasury and SARS on the 30th, that's on Wednesday, to begin to process the rates bill so as to undo the decision that the minister has taken on the 12th of March. Thank you.
All right. And then there's a lot to talk about because, and perhaps Khaya, let me bring you in here. Edward Khaya Sithole earlier speaking to the channel, and he talks about, yes, so there was the announcement certainly by the Finance Minister on the reversal of that 0.5 percentage point VAT hike. But there is, of course, the finality and validity of that announcement. I don't know where you place it as we stand right now. So where businesses are listening into this conversation, Khaya Sithole saying, make sure that by the 1st of May, all businesses' systems are prepared to go back to a 15% VAT rate. Where do you stand on the validity of it and what businesses should be doing? Khaya.
Good evening. So obviously, until the court ruling came out yesterday, the position was that the VAT rate was indeed legally 15.5%, unless Parliament found a way to sit before the 1st of May and obviously started processing an alternative answer. So businesses were well within their rights to start preparing for the 15.5% eventuality, because from the moment the minister made the announcement, Section 7.4 of the VAT Act is quite clear that if the minister makes an announcement on a national budget and then announces an effective date, that is the law. So businesses have to work with the 15.5%. Now, the question of how long it took businesses to adjust their systems in preparation for the 15.5%, and the question of how long it will take them to revert back to the 15%, that will differ across different businesses, which is why the commissioner then says that, look, we are hoping that everybody will be able to do it, but in instances where there are anomalies, we're going to have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So the businesses were doing exactly what they should have been doing. And in fact, it was surprising that some businesses started announcing that they would go back to 15% before the court judgment, because there was actually really no basis for them to say that. If the court judgment had not come through and the National Assembly had not been able to sit, then the answer would have been 15.5%.
Yeah. Of course, you've got the EFF that, and we spoke to them last night as well, Mr. Maswanganyi, as they responded to the order of the court. And one of the issues that was raised quite emphatically by the likes of Sinao Tambo of the EFF was what they've called procedural missteps and the manipulation of procedure to secure parliamentary approval. That is, of course, also within the adoption of that fiscal framework. I don't know what you say to that, and certainly what this means moving forward, how you ensure that we're not going back into a situation where you've got the fracas of a political party saying there has been, what did they call it? I think they called it procedural hijacking in the adoption of the fiscal framework.
That's not the case, Naledi. Parliament operates its business on the basis of the Constitution, the laws of the Republic, and the rules that Parliament has adopted. You have got the rules for the National Assembly, the rules of the NCOP, and in case there is a joint sitting, like the State of the Nation address and other addresses, you apply what we call joint rules. And the Standing Committee on Finance has made sure that it complies with those three provisions: the Constitution, the laws of the Republic, that's the money bills, and the rules. And members came to the meeting knowing very well on the 1st of April that the business of that meeting was to consider and adopt the report. There was a mover, as usual. Mr. Beasley moved for the adoption. Ms. Makuele, who's from the ANC, seconded, and the majority adopted the report. That's the standard procedure. There was no fracas. That's how the meeting is conducted. And that's why it's there in the judgment. There's nowhere the judgment say that there was a fracas in the meeting. But we hope that within a short space of time, now that we are getting into May, the minister will agree with the speaker on another date upon which he's going to come back, table the fiscal framework together with the appropriation bill, the division of revenue bill, and they will be processed accordingly. In terms of the rules, it should be within 16 days, and the appropriation and revenue should be within 35 days, so that we are able to deal with critical issues that have to do with the budget. That is the pro-poor budget that must address the issue of infrastructure, where 1 trillion rand has been allocated to give a boost to the economy, create jobs, deal with poverty, inequality, employ teachers, more especially in KwaZulu-Natal, 17,000 teachers. Their future is at stake if we don't pass this budget. Employ doctors and other health workers, and deal with the issues of social development, which is quite very important. And what is critical to this budget is that it is moving away from what it was a problem in the past. That is what we call the austerity measures, which was not allocating money into the economic programs of the country. But now Treasury has moved away from austerity measures and is putting a lot of money on the economic sector and the infrastructure programs.
Khaya, I see you frowning a little bit. I mean, what do you make of what we're hearing? And, you know, there's also the issue is, as Mr. Maswanganyi explains, the procedural journey that still lies ahead for budget. And again, I call it 3.0 because I've heard that term a few times now. So I'm hanging on to it. But the issue now is, what balls do you think are still hanging in the air? You've got, for instance, the issue about whether or not we've got austerity in this budget. What is going to be done to resolve what is still what the minister called a 75 billion rand deficit?
Well, I have to say, I do empathize with Dr. Maswanganyi here, because he is indeed the chair of the Standing Committee on Finance. But the reality here is that there was definitely an issue with how the committee moved its report into the National Assembly. And to simplify it, it is this matter of, you have a committee that says, look, we are adopting this subject to these particular caveats. Now, I don't think we've ever had a piecemeal adoption before that says we have with everything else except the VAT number. But even if that was the case, remember the caveat that these parties say they gave to the ANC is that we're giving you 30 days to come up with alternative revenue measures. The Minister of Finance, who the only one who come up with such alternative revenue measures, says he found no such thing. By the time he got to the Western Cape Higher Court, he still insisted that he had found no such thing. So it's quite extraordinary that we're laboring under this idea that these parties endorsed a particular process when the Minister of Finance, who's the only one who could have executed, has not come back and said, oh, by the way, in that 30-day interim period, these are the alternative measures that are found, so therefore VAT must go away. The VAT did not go away because of what those parties said or what the committee said must be endorsed subject to this particular caveat. But I have to empathize with Mr. Maswanganyi because he chairs a committee. And the reality here is that whether the court said that there was a fracas or not, the court has issued a ruling, and that ruling says that the resolutions stand to be set aside. Now, the National Assembly resolutions could only be set aside if the genesis of the resolution they voted on was flawed, and that is the Standing Committee on Finance. The next thing here is that these parties keep insisting that they somehow, with the ANC, managed to find this meeting of the minds, to find these alternative revenue measures. Not a single one has actually told us what these alternative revenue measures that are found have been. And in fact, you've got quite the opposite, where the minister says, well, now that VAT is off the table, I now have an even bigger hole. So we started off in the very first budget with the hole being set to be 58 billion rand. And then in the second version of the budget, the hole was 13.5 billion rand. And now we're talking about a 75 billion in the hole. So the hole is there. So there's no idea. I do not understand this idea that these parties have found alternative revenue measures. They need to tell us. And in the absence of those, there will indeed be austerity, because it's either you raise revenue, you borrow more, which the Minister of Finance refuses to do, or you cut your spending. And that's what he's going to do.
And those questions still remain. Look, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll wrap this up. Perhaps, as Khaya Sithole, of course, says there, that Mr. Joe Maswanganyi, in an unenviable position on the other side of it, perhaps he can give us what it is that the political parties need to be thinking about at this time, so that we're able to get to the other side of this next budget. On the other side of this, stay with us. Welcome back. We continue to, of course, talk about what's next now that you've got the Western Cape High Court, of course, confirming, if you will choose those words, the reversal of that 0.5 percentage point VAT hike. The process, of course, needing to head back to Parliament, the fiscal framework needing to be adopted, and the Standing Committee on Finance chairperson Joe Maswanganyi are really going to be overseeing some of that. And a point that was made earlier by Khaya Sithole, Mr. Maswanganyi, is just how unenviable your position is. So we give you the platform now, and you say all those political parties that will be in your committee, what is it that you think they need to bring to the party so that, for the sake of South Africans, we get to the end of this process?
Thanks, Naledi. The minister is going to table a budget again. He's going to table the fiscal framework together with the division of revenue bill, appropriation bill, and all those will outline as to how is he going to close what we call a fiscal gap. There is a fiscal gap of 75 billion rand, which has to be closed. It's not the first time that we deal with this challenge. In 2018, you'll remember there was an announcement by the then president that there should be an increase on the NSFAS to 58 billion. That created a fiscal gap of 36 billion rand. And National Treasury, or government as a whole, found mechanism to deal with that. And I believe even this time around, the minister will outline as to how SARS is going to build more capacity to collect revenue. And the SARS has committed itself that if it is allocated more budget by Parliament, it will strengthen its systems, deal with tax avoidance, and a whole range of other challenges, like because now the economy also expresses itself in the digital platform. There's a lot of revenue which is not collected at that platform, and many other challenges that SARS was facing. And we are convinced that since a lot of money has been allocated to SARS, it has built capacity in terms of IT and other infrastructure, and employ more personnel to raise more revenue. So we are quite confident that when Minister Godongwana comes back, he will be able to table a budget that is pro-poor, that will be able to deal with social expenditure. And I'm convinced if the minister says we are moving away from austerity measures, why should we doubt him? Because he has done that on the 12th of March, and we believe that coming back again, he will be able to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've appreciated your time, Joe Maswanganyi there, of course, as chairperson, the Standing Committee on Finance. Khaya, I'm going to let you give us your last thoughts. And I actually am more concerned about our own pockets as we close off. For anyone who's watching this and says, all right, well, I hid somewhere on the 1st or 2nd of May and I am charged 15.5% because some businesses may not have had the time to update their systems. What do I do? Where do I go? Is that something that, you know, we should be worried about?
Look, I think the best we can do is just be a bit more vigilant when we transact on that day. And if there are instances where obviously people do see that there's an incremental charge, I think SARS will make enough avenues available for us to either directly engage with the vendors. And if we don't get any joy out there, there must be a way of escalating that matter. So I do think that it's not going to be a pervasive issue because most businesses will be responsible enough to say, well, actually, let us just revert to the system that we had. Or even in instances where our systems aren't allowing us to do so, you should be able to give that person the change that is created by that excess charge. So I don't think it's going to be as big a problem as it would have been if the announcement had come much later. And I think also, to Mr. Maswanganyi's point, I mean, we are hoping that we obviously get a budget that balances the very key multiple social considerations that South Africa always has to deal with. I just think it will be a bit difficult for the minister to do so now, particularly given the constraints that already exist. And if SARS does indeed get the type of allocation that enables them to get more from what already exists from our tech system, that will definitely be a welcome development.
All right. Gentlemen, an absolute pleasure. Khaya Sithole, the independent analyst and chartered accountant. A little bit earlier, Joe Maswanganyi, the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance. Well, you're still watching Newzroom PM, the late edition. We've got your headlines at the top of the hour. Do stay with us.